We continue to track the hour-by-hour developments of Edward Snowden. He's the man, of course, who leaked top-secret information about the United States surveillance and data collection programs. Last we knew, he was in Moscow, and although there was a lot of speculation that he'd hop on a flight to Cuba, he never did. So the question now, where is he and what happens next? We have a team of correspondents found out across the world, from Russia to Washington, from Cuba to Ecuador, even in Venezuela. Let's go first to Anya Ardayeva, who joins us by phone from Moscow right now. And Anya, what do we know about Snowden's location?
Elaine, so far there has been no word from the Russian authorities on whether they're conducting any sort of investigation into Edward Snowden's mysterious disappearance. Neither of the authorities here have responded to the claim that was made earlier by White House spokesman Jay Carney that Mr. Snowden might still be in Russia. What we do know is that on Sunday, Russian state news agencies here reported that Edward Snowden was taking a flight from Hong Kong to Moscow and that he arrived in the Russian capital on board that flight. However, he did not make any public appearance and he was not identified by any other passengers. He reportedly checked into a hotel and was expected to take a direct flight from Moscow to Havana on Monday, but he never boarded that plane, as you mentioned. And earlier, Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the authorities here did not have any information on Snowden, and Russian news agencies also quoted statements from unnamed sources. The statement said that they were unable to detain the former U.S. national security contractor because he remained in a transit area of the airport and he had not crossed the border into the Russian territory. Was he to enter Russia, he would need a Russian visa, a special document to enter the Russian territory being a U.S. citizen. Back to you, Elaine.
And Anya, that was the last word. So where might he be hiding? You mentioned that special transit area. Is there a possibility that he is still there?
There is a possibility still there. We have not received any report from any of the authorities about his whereabouts. They just declined to comment. And at this point of time, he could be anywhere. He could be in that transit zone as well. That's right, Elaine.
All right, Anya Ardayeva reporting live from Moscow. Thank you so much for that update. From Russia to Washington now, the situation is certainly causing a diplomatic mess. From the United States, pressing Russia to find Snowden and send him back to the United States. CCTV Sean Calebs joins us now with that angle of the story. Sean.
Well, Elaine, it has been an international game of catch me if you can. And we all know very well by now that Snowden hasn't been seen in public since he allegedly landed in Moscow over the weekend. Well, the whole saga has become increasingly frustrating and increasingly embarrassing for the United States. And today, some U.S. officials lashed out at Russia and China. The mysterious case of Edward Snowden is inflaming international tension between the U.S. and a host of other nations. And it has the Obama administration barely able to control its frustration and fury.
What we know is that we're following all the appropriate legal channels and working with various other countries to make sure that rule of law is observed.
As far as the U.S. is concerned, the rule of law should have had Snowden on a plane from Hong Kong to the United States to face prosecution for stealing government information about highly classified surveillance programs and then leaking the details to newspapers. The American government says there is no ambiguity in the law and says Hong Kong and the U.S. have a long history of respecting an extradition treaty. But this time, it was different. Hong Kong balked at taking Snowden into custody.
We're just not buying that this was a technical decision by a Hong Kong immigration official. This was a deliberate choice by the government to release a fugitive despite a valid arrest warrant.
The U.S., from President Obama on down, believes the decision will adversely affect U.S.-China relations. One political expert says Snowden is being used as a pawn in a global power play to embarrass the U.S. over its National Security Agency secret surveillance of everyday U.S. citizens. Attorney David Scher specializes in extradition cases and says the U.S. has a right to be frustrated.
Why are they protecting him? Well, are they thumbing their nose at the United States? I mean, is it political pressure? Are they trying to say, we're not going to kowtow to you anymore? So that's a whole other issue that is now kind of in the foreground.
It is making its way to the foreground. The U.S. is operating on the belief that Snowden flew from Hong Kong to Moscow. Many U.S. lawmakers are livid with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Russia-U.S. relations have been frosty over Syria recently, and there is concern that Snowden could put them in the deep freeze.
The bottom line is very simple. Allies are supposed to treat each other in decent ways, and Putin always seems almost eager to put a finger in the eye of the United States, whether it is Syria, Iran, and now, of course, with Snowden.
Tough words. The U.S. did what it could to try and pin Snowden down in Hong Kong, chiefly by revoking his passport. He was apparently able to travel using what's called a special refugee travel document that he got through Ecuador with the assistance of Wikileaks founder, Julian Assange. Elaine?
Well, Sean, the South China Morning Post spoke with Snowden again, and he told them something that would lead us to believe that this was premeditated a long time ago. What exactly did he say?
Yeah, we know there's a report out through that publication saying that they got an interview on June 12th, which would have been about 22 days after Snowden went underground. And during that interview, Snowden said that he specifically took the job through Booz Allen with the NSA to get his hands on sensitive national security information. His whole point was to try and release that, to show that the U.S. was spying, was monitoring, well, in his words, spying, was monitoring phone calls and other activity from everyday citizens. But the U.S. says, look, he may be saying that he did this for his moral conscience, but in their mind, the bottom line is he's a spy, he is not a whistleblower, and they're going after him, and they are going to continue to go after him, Elaine.
All right, Sean Caleb's live for us here in Washington. We want to move on to Cuba, where a plane carrying Snowden was rumored to be headed, but Snowden wasn't on board. Our reporter in Havana, Michael Voss, joins us live now. And Michael, a big surprise that he didn't show up?
Yes, it is. The plane from Moscow has landed in Havana Airport. Most of the passengers are off. We've talked to them. They said he didn't take his seat, so it does appear that he wasn't on this plane. Now, if Ecuador is his final destination of choice, then in some ways he has to come through Cuba. It's the safest route. There are no direct flights from Moscow there or Venezuela. The U.S. government has been in touch with the Cuban authorities, as with the Ecuadorian and Venezuelan authorities, saying, please do not assist this man, don't help him in transit, send him back to the United States. I think if he comes through Cuba, that is unlikely. Were he to turn up in Cuba, Elaine, and ask for asylum here, that would put the authorities in a very difficult position. There are fugitives from justice, U.S. justice, living today in Cuba. There's a woman, Joanne Chesimard, who's on the FBI's most wanted list, a former Black Power activist from the 60s and 70s. And Cuba did provide a home to the former CIA agent Philip Agee, who wrote a book called Inside the CIA and named names of CIA operatives. He ended up in Cuba. He spent the remainder of his life here. He died here in 2008. But Cuba says that it's no longer accepting U.S. fugitives. And only a couple of months ago, it sent back an American who'd come to Cuba having kidnapped his children, and he was sent back to the United States.
Very interesting, Michael. Thank you for that update. We appreciate your report and look forward to going to you with any new developments. Michael Voss in Havana. Our worldwide coverage of the Edward Snowden case continues now. Next up, Dan Collins live for us in Quito. And Dan, all the speculation was that Snowden would end up there in Ecuador, but as far as we know, he hasn't. So could you describe the mood there right now? We'll try to get Dan Collins for you in just a second. Here's his report.
Ecuador is playing a waiting game. Edward Snowden wasn't on a flight to Havana, and WikiLeaks has kept quiet about his whereabouts. For now, it remains unclear if Ecuador will grant him asylum. Speaking from Hanoi, Vietnam, Ecuador's Foreign Minister Ricardo Patiño was equally vague about Snowden's location.
We would like to say that, as we all know, he arrived in the Russian Federation. The Ecuadorian government has been respectful and diplomatic with the Russian government and has informed them that Ecuador is considering the asylum request.
Patiño said, quote, human rights principles will always be placed above any other interest. Snowden's flight from US extradition has once again pitted the tiny South American nation against the superpower north of the equator. Compounding Washington's likely irritation, an announcement by WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange that it was his group that orchestrated Snowden's departure from Hong Kong. Assange, who became a Washington nemesis for publishing sensitive US State Department cables related to the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, took refuge in Ecuador's London embassy. In a global game of cat and mouse, Ecuador enabled Assange to dodge extradition to Sweden, where he faced possible deportation to the United States. The Snowden case once again puts Ecuador's populist president, Rafael Correa, in the global spotlight, giving him yet another chance to defy what many of his followers call the empire.
Here we go again. Basically, if we go again, we already had the Assange thing, and now we have this one. Basically, Ecuador doesn't need that. And I would like the government of Ecuador to practice and preach more freedom of expression within Ecuador than without.
That was Dan Collins reporting from Ecuador. We want to continue our team coverage now. Let's go to Martin Markowitz, who is on the ground in Caracas, Venezuela. And Martin, walk us through what may happen if Snowden shows up there. Would he be extradited to the United States?
Yeah, the thing with Snowden coming here, first of all, it doesn't seem like he's going to come here because, number one, there is an extradition treaty between the United States and Venezuela that dates back to 1922. And it's still actually in effect, and they do use it mostly for sending narco traffickers back to the United States or vice versa. But since for the last 10 years, there's been a bad relationship between the Chavez government and the United States. And when Venezuela asked to extradite the bomber of the Cubana airline jet in 1976, Luis Posada Carrillas, the United States refused. And Chavez has, ever since then, has not cooperated as much with these treaties as before. But it's a different time now. Nicolas Maduro won an election that was hotly contested, basically by 1.5 points. There's been food shortages, there's high inflation, and he has signaled that he wants to break from his predecessor and actually maybe have a friendlier relationship with the United States. So most people here think that it's not in his best political interest to have such a high-profile person come to Venezuela right now and seek sanctuary. Probably better with another ally like Ecuador that has already hidden in the embassy Julian Assange.
Has Nicolas Maduro come out and said anything as of yet on this case, or is it still just speculation there right now?
There's still speculation. Today was actually Armed Forces Day. It's a very big day in Venezuela. It's basically, where they celebrate the military. And Nicolas Maduro was 3 hours outside of Caracas following a military procession where he gave a big speech. And there was no mention of that as of right now. I think they're waiting to see what happens with Ecuador and Cuba before they make an official comment. But most people think that Maduro does not need this right now, given the political situation in Venezuela, despite despite his government saying that they are basically not best friends with the United States as of right now, but they want to improve the relationship.
All right, Martin Markowitz reporting live. Thank you for that update from Caracas. This is a complicated case with so many layers of legal questions. Let's get some answers now, and I want to bring in Michael Wilds. He's a former federal prosecutor here in the United States. He joins us now from New York. And Michael, one of the biggest issues right now is the fact, by all accounts, Snowden got out of Hong Kong. Authorities there say it was a problem based with an arrest warrant, something that the U.S. denies. So what should we make of all this? Is it possible there really was a problem with the arrest warrant, that it did not meet legal requirements in Hong Kong?
I'm an immigration lawyer by trade, and I can tell you that there seemed to be a lot of snafus as to why his passport wasn't revoked by the U.S. State Department, why red alerts weren't placed even though they knew where he was. They seem to still not know where he is. And ultimately, whether or not this gentleman will be able to be, catch me if you can, as one of the reporters mentioned before, chased throughout the international world. We know a few things. We know that countries will not surrender individuals if they're going to entertain political asylum. And we also know, because of all of the lack of friendship and collegiality that America's so-called friends in Russia and China are going to do everything they can to expose our surveillance methods and procedures. Add that as a country is chosen one after the other as to whether or not they'll ultimately have extradition, and it's anyone's guess right now where he is and where he's going to show. This is not a very good day for America's jurisprudence, and more importantly, it's a very poor snapshot of international relations. Imagine any one of these countries now turning to America who would need to help them in the future. This is, again, a fugitive from justice, a gentleman that's being castigated not as a whistleblower who could have gone to Congress, who could have gone within the internal machinations of the government when he went there if he objected on conscience. It appears that this is exclusively his ego, and that he's acting in a way that will not only imperil agents and his former colleagues at the National Security Administration, but America's moxie and teeth in the war on terrorism.
Michael, I want to go back to the passport. Why was his passport revoked so late? Isn't it one of those things that the U.S. should have done a long time ago, much sooner than when they did? I mean, the past 48 hours make the U.S. look pretty unorganized and fairly clumsy when it comes to the handling of keeping Snowden where he was.
I think here that we see a transparency about America reacting in a way that's not trying to cover things up and unfortunately is chasing behind the 8 ball at this point. America really should have revoked his passport immediately and placed all international alerts. And there are questions as to the propriety of physically going and getting this gentleman, because if there are terrorist attacks that are being thwarted, if there are agents and methods and procedures of our intelligence community that are imperiled, it speaks to our nation's security to take immediate action. It doesn't reflect well of our country, but more importantly, it reflects poorly with missed opportunities from Russia and China abound to step up and try to repair its relationship. Again, these are two countries that have selectively targeted the use of the internet and are being regarded for their transparency and trying to give a person a safe haven.
Michael,
I don't think it's in
Michael, I have a
Sure.
couple other questions I want to get you to answer. What do you make of the fact that Snowden still has not turned up in any of the places that he has been speculated to go to? Is it in his favor or the U.S. government's favor that it seems that no country has taken him in at this point?
Where the government's methods and procedures are at risk in America, Snowden's interests are given greater opportunity the more time he has. We see that the government of Ecuador has issued a refugee travel document at a distance, and that he's already being rumored to be going through China, to Russia, to Venezuela, to Cuba. All these countries and everybody are giving him safe haven, and he's now picking his options, which are abound and bountiful. This is not a good day for the war on terrorism. This is not a good day for America and its friends. But this man will be found and will have to face to the music for his treason.
Well, we have about 20 seconds left. How difficult would it be to prosecute Snowden should he turn up in Ecuador or Cuba or Venezuela? Is it impossible that he'll be brought to justice then?
I don't think anything's impossible. If we see, again, if you believe fundamentally that the war on terrorism began in 1979, we're decades into this, and exposing the methods and procedures of our nation's security has the highest of protocol, and I believe that the government ultimately will seek either extradition or other methods to see that justice is served. It's just time, and one day we'll see the light of justice. I think that time ultimately today is on Snowden's side, but in the next weeks and months, America will actually see justice.
All right, Michael Wilds, we appreciate your insight from New York.